Welcome to The Line. An important part of New Mexico's economy is the availability of good jobs that will ensure families have a roof over their head and food on the table. Now, how affordable is housing in New Mexico, and how hard is it finding and filling jobs in our state right now? Here to talk about this and other topics of the week are Stephanie Maez. She's Executive Director of Progress Now, New Mexico. Tom Garrity is here. He is of the Garrity Group PR. Stephen Spitz, host of New Mexico People, Places, and Ideas on 89.9 KUNM FM.
Thank you, Gene.
More than welcome. And Martha Burke, she's with us, political psychologist and radio commentator on KSFR in Santa Fe, and I don't know the dial position on that.
101.1.
101.1, that's important. Now, Stephanie, starting with you, a recent article in Albuquerque Business First caught our eye and looked at how much apartment space or housing space one can find for $1,500 around the country. And here in New Mexico or in Albuquerque, it'll get you about 1,600 square feet and change, which is a pretty good size deal.
That is, comparatively speaking, when you're looking at places like New York and LA. And, you know, I think the article even referenced that we could live in a mansion compared to what you could in other urban areas. I do think, though, there are a number of variables. We were talking before we started filming, Martha mentioned, and it was a great point. There are a number of variables that contribute to the level of affordability.
That's right.
Whether or not it's a single family home, it's a family of four. I think there are a number of considerations when we talk about the affordability of housing. And I know we're going to delve into some of the other issues on housing affordability and the impact of the Trump tax plan.
That's right.
Or I like to call it the Trump tax trap because it awards some and slashes others. That's right. And we will talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure.
I love it. And Stephen, you know, on Stephanie's point, the idea that it gets you about half that square footage in Denver, getting close to home, a little bit less of that in, you know, San Antonio, in our region. But $1,500, that's a big rent when you think about it for a lot of families here. Our average is $823.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and even that for a lot of our New Mexicans, fellow New Mexicans, that's a pretty stiff rent if you think about it. We're talking about a lot of folks who are dealing with $600 and less, and they have to do it that way. So let's talk about that a little bit. Affordable housing.
Well, I would look at it maybe from the other side of it too, is we have a very high unemployment rate.
Right.
So, you know, affordability has to do with the availability of jobs.
That's right.
And we have a major jobs problem here in New Mexico. And I think we have the second highest unemployment rate in the country.
That's right. Under Alaska.
So,
that's right.
and if you're not employed, all those things are unaffordable.
That's right.
So I think, and this is all, we've talked about this endlessly on the line, but you know, how do we get our economy going? That's a huge, huge question.
Right.
And there's no obvious answer to it. There's no silver bullet. But I think one of the big problems, and we saw that Jeff Mitchell, an economist who studies these things, says there's a big mismatch between this, the educated workers that we're educating and the jobs that are available. So we're educating lawyers, we're educating architects, we're educating people in finance, but those aren't our big job sectors.
That's right.
So in the big job sectors, tourism, oil and gas, the labs, they're
even
not
new
able
industries.
To find, they're not able to find people. Right.
Yeah, like wind and solar.
We've really got a problem. So, you know, if you're not making enough money, all those numbers are unaffordable.
I appreciate you putting that in perspective. Absolutely. Tommy, Jeff Mitchell was just mentioned. You were there, at my understanding, at there was an economic forum event, and Mr. Mitchell spoke about these things. What was your takeaway from?
You know, the New Mexico Partnership gave a presentation. It was a fascinating presentation. They were talking about how they're attracting business to the state, how New Mexico needs to change its messaging so it's not that, you know, I was impressed with it overall because it was less on, you know, what are the incentives, what do we have to offer, as opposed to how can New Mexico come alongside businesses to attract them.
I see.
And so, you know, I thought it was a very fascinating presentation. I think one of the things that surprises me through the preparation for this topic today was a discussion on the reliance on federal funding.
Right.
And that, to me, is, I think, still one of the biggest challenges that New Mexico has. In one of the pre-reads that was provided, there was talking about SNAP cuts. And it struck me as very interesting and sad because it explains the state of our economy. And we're talking about the turnaround, economic turnaround of what $1 of SNAP funding does in our economy. Now that's great because SNAP funding helps families in crisis, it helps children in crisis, but it doesn't help anything for turning the state around. And when we start to get into the mindset of, how much time does this go back into the economy based on federal funding? We've already hit rock bottom. And so, I think one of the things that Mr. Mitchell and the New Mexico Partnership talked about is how do we not just build the infrastructure to attract more science and engineering, but also how do we address the workforce issues of making sure we have high school graduates who are employable.
Right.
So
and meeting people where they are, and yeah, I could imagine. Martha, we're kind of doing a nice mashup here. Just kind of circle back to the housing situation. It's always struck me, I have a lot of personal friends anecdotally that might be single women or single women with a child. And this housing issue is a big deal for them, and it's sort of under the radar. If you're trying to raise a child alone or two children alone, trying to afford $650, $700 a month to have two different bedrooms, it's a really tough go in our city and in our state right now. I'm not quite sure how we get past that, but what's your sense of that as well?
Well, it is tough, and we've been talking about people have to have jobs to be able to pay the rent and so forth.
Right.
Let's talk about people that do have jobs.
Right.
Here's something we could do. Raise the minimum wage. Look at the minimum wage of one of our largest employers in this state is Walmart. Walmart's minimum wage as of the last couple of weeks went up to $11 an hour. Right. Well, that sounds pretty good compared to the federal minimum of $7.25, but let me tell you what it won't buy. This average rent in Albuquerque is $823 a month, as someone mentioned. That is at $11 an hour. If you're full-time and you get 2 weeks paid vacation, that is still going to take over 50% of your take-home pay. That's before food, that's before automobile, clothing, utilities. That is the problem, one of the big problems. We are a low-wage state. These big employers, just to answer, some people may be thinking, well, Walmart can't afford to do that. They have to raise prices. Not exactly. Their profits last year were $485 billion.
With a B. Wow.
With a B.
Wow.
So would they really have to raise prices? Probably not. Maybe they could cut stock dividends. Maybe they could cut CEO bonuses. A lot of things that could happen.
I'm interested in that metric, though, about 50% of your take-home.
50%.
Because folks say if you get above 30%, you're in trouble, if that's what it takes to keep a roof over your head.
Well, the actual numbers are this. At $11 an hour, your before-tax income is $22,880 a year.
Okay.
And then after taxes, it's going to be less, and $823 a month is more than 50% of what you get to take home.
That's scary for anybody. That's really scary. Stephanie, we had a minimum wage increase, of course, a big fight in Santa Fe. I'm glad Martha has brought this up. There's sort of always an elephant in the room in any conversation. This might be the one because you see the fights across the country. It starts at about $15 an hour. That's where it starts to go there.
Well, I think the common thread that you're hearing, Gene, among folks around the table is that we really do need to invest in what we know works. And what we know works is investing in our families, in our communities, investing in early childhood education, investing in the workforce, investing in hardworking families that right now are not making a minimum or a living wage. They may be making a minimum wage. But I do think there are real opportunities to double down and not just invest in the quality of life when it comes to the things that I just mentioned, but also identifying new industries, as Steve mentioned, really focusing on what are some of those jobs that maybe we don't necessarily have right now when we look at wind and solar. And, for once, New Mexico can really be a leader on a positive list and something. And so I think there's some real opportunities here.
Let me go back to something you mentioned earlier, and that is the tax plan and what it's done to affordable housing. There's been some
it's huge, Gene.
In Santa Fe. It's a huge difficulty for Mexico.
Exactly. I mean, Martha mentioned numbers, so I'll bring a few up myself. $1.4 trillion is the amount of money that is going to the wealthy, the well-connected, and corporations in federal tax cuts under Trump's new tax trap. And in order to balance that, it's really happening on the backs of hardworking families. You know, we're seeing SNAP cuts potentially cut. You asked specifically about affordable housing, incentives to private sector investments in affordable housing developments.
Right. Yep.
In the reading you mentioned, or I believe it was the Business First article, or maybe it was Steve Terrell's in the New Mexican.
Steve Terrell's, yeah.
Yeah, he talks about how in the Santa Fe Housing Authority development, $9.5 million of the $23.4 million that cost the Santa Fe Authority to invest in a large development for affordable housing was by private sector investments from Google, from Verizon.
That's right.
Now, with under this Trump tax trap, it really disincentivizes the private sector to really be a player in that.
And that's a big problem for Santa Fe, Stephen, isn't it? It's just when you really think about it, they're having a huge trouble with affordable housing anyway. This is the last thing they needed.
Yeah, Martha probably knows a lot more about this than I do, but NIMBY is, I think, one of the biggest problems in Santa Fe.
Well, they're probably one of the highest income inequality cities in the state, if not the top one.
Right.
And it's interesting because the NIMBY thing, okay, there's so many restaurants in Santa Fe. That's a big draw. Who's staffing them?
That's right.
And how much money are they making, and where are they living?
And Tom, there's other issues there. Affordable housing, it's about workers being close to where they could find those jobs. You know what I mean? They can't commute from Rio Rancho completely, so it's a difficulty.
Yeah, you couldn't buy the gas to go up there.
That's right. Exactly right.
Yeah, and so the challenges that you have, I mean, New Mexico is just not positioned well at all to take advantage of the Trump tax cuts. To take advantage of affordable housing. Here's the reason why: is the Trump tax cuts were really designed to help manufacturers. Right. New Mexico has no manufacturing or manufacturing to speak of.
That's right.
So as a result, we get left out. We have a really heavy reliance upon federal funding. So as a result, because the state hasn't done anything to change anything over the last 20 years, 20, 50 years.
Fair enough.
What about all that money that's going to come in from the nuclear buildup? I mean, the labs are going to get billions.
So when you look at, but that goes to the separation, right?
Yeah.
All the New Mexico partnership, and they're attracting jobs that are going to focus on scientists, which is great. But you know what? That's such a small portion. There's a need.
Federal inflow of
absolutely. Money. But you know what? It goes out of state. They use companies that are here, but they are companies that have resources out of state. Right. So it's just a pass through. Yep. And that's the really sad thing about it is that you don't have any real industry here that we can take advantage of tax cuts, that we can take advantage of bringing up folks off of SNAP to help them to have a living that you don't need to rely on federal funding.
That's a key point.
I want to just bring up one more thing.
About 20 seconds if you could.
SNAP, Medicaid, housing subsidies, those are all corporate welfare. Because if employers paid more, their employees would not have to be on SNAP.
Right.
We don't think about that very much.
But if there was enough economy, they could. But I think what you're doing with all of these requirements of potentially increasing the minimum wage is you're squeezing the small business to try and you're squeezing blood out of a stone. And there's
oftentimes small businesses are already paying.
I don't consider $485 billion.
But that's not a small business. I mean, when you look at we cannot rely on
they're
Walmart.
One of the largest employers in the state.
Walmart is?
Yes. They are. I just read that in some of the background material.
I think
there's a fair point there. I think Tom's making though. When you think about a small shop, 5 to 10 to 15 seat, insurance becomes difficult. Everything becomes difficult.
Well,
unless the economy can support those rises, it's a difficulty.
It depends on whose ox is being gored, though. Do you want the workers to pay for that out of their hide, so to speak? Do you want them sleeping in cars?
I think the research shows, Gene, if the increase in the minimum wage is not that far away from the average wage that's currently being paid, then it doesn't have a negative effect on employment, and it does lift the boats that Martha is talking about.
I do want to say that the studies that I've seen, it's kind of a moot point because oftentimes small businesses are already paying well above the minimum wage.
Right.
So
to stay competitive.
The impact, impact if maybe it's increasing the minimum wage for Walmart or for these large corporations that aren't paying.
Let's see where that goes. When we come back to the line, we look at recent developments concerning the boards of regents at New Mexico's two largest universities.